Saya Heather Variava, Wakil Duta Besar Amerika Serikat di Indonesia. Menyambut datangnya bulan Ramadan, saya mendoakan keberkahan selama sebulan penuh bagi semua yang menjalani. Di saat-saat penuh ketidakpastian dan kecemasan yang sedang berlangsung saat ini, saya terinspirasi oleh berbagai kisah mengenai harapan, kemanusiaan, dan kedermawanan yang tak terhitung yang kita miliki bersama. Semoga bulan ini memperkuat persahabatan kita. Selamat menunaikan ibadah puasa.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Ad America TV. Hi, I'm Maya Trainer. I'm one of the e-guides here at Ad America, and we welcome our audience joining us online. We truly hope that you are doing well and staying safe amidst this outbreak. Well, anyway, for those of you who are first-timers here, hi, welcome to Ad America TV for the first time. Ad America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center. Our mission is to provide a space for young generations of Indonesia to learn more about the United States. We have temporarily moved to a solely digital platform so you can enjoy our program from the comfort of your own home and help flatten the curve of COVID-19. Don't forget to leave your questions in the comment box below, and our panelists will answer them later in the seminar. And for our friends here who are joining us through Zoom, there are a couple of features that you can use to actively participate in the seminar. You can use the raise hand section to ask your questions with your video on, or you can also use the chat box section whenever you wanted to say hi to the other participant and also the panelist as well. But please keep in mind to use these features wisely, right? Cool. Now today we will be having a session titled Earth Optimism for Educators, Thinking Big, the Impact of Optimism. A friendly reminder for all of you, as continuation of our 10th anniversary celebration and a full month celebration of Earth Day, we are having a very special activities with giveaways this month. In this giveaway, we're giving out not 3, not 4, but 5 folding bikes. How exciting! So make sure to stay tuned till the end of this event to know how to participate. In the meantime, I will break the ice a little bit with our social media quiz. You ready? Okay, here we go. The question is, in rural areas, this type of gas can be generated and used for cooking and lighting. Is it A, biogas, B, oxygen, C, ammonia, or D, none of these? I will repeat the question one more time. Listen carefully. In rural areas, this type of gas can be generated and used for cooking and lighting. Is it A, biogas, B, oxygen, C, ammonia, or D, none of these? You can participate this quiz through our social media comment section, and stay tuned till the end of this event to find out if you got the answers right. And now, without further ado, please welcome our moderator for today, Mas Yohanis Lamere Waisili alumni, MA candidate in Social Enterprise, American University.
Thank you so much, Maya. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 4th series of Earth Optimism for Educators. This program is designed for teachers, activists, practitioners in education for sustainability and conservation field to learn more about the best practices in this field. Great to see you all. Hope these sessions will make your Saturday night become more meaningful. And thank you so much for everyone who joining our discussion today from different places in Indonesia. I'm Ioannis, joining from Washington, D.C., and a grad student here at American University. And I'm originally from Tanimbar Island, the southernmost part of Maluku province. And I would like to encourage you guys to check that island, as I always say in the beginning of every session. So as you guys probably already know, that the theme of today's discussion is Thinking Big, where we will be talking about the impact of Earth optimism. The questions that we're going to explore are, what does it take to make a difference in conservation? And how can we support the next generation in hastening a solution-forward approach to conservation? Together with us in our session today, we have Jennifer Collins and Stephen Canty joining from East Coast. And I'm excited to welcome both of you. Before we begin our conversation, I'd like to open with a short video about the work of Smithsonian Institution. Please enjoy.
America. 1846, an audacious idea to grow and broadcast more knowledge than the world had ever seen. With an eye to the future, that dream was the Smithsonian, your Smithsonian. Expanding the portrait of a people, revealing the building blocks of life, to discover new species and save those we already know. A knowledge powerhouse with purpose and a community mindset. Inspiring a new generation to learn from the past. Speak up. Be civic. Serve a nation. So that together we can step into the future with optimism. No dreams deferred.
What a great video. Thank you so much. So before I introduce our speakers, I have a couple of announcements for our participants today. Number one, in regards to the certificate, we do provide certificates only for those who participated in 4 out of 5 Earth Optimism for Educators sessions. And if you guys have a question, please use the chat box to ask your question, and we will read it also to our speakers. You can use the chat box to interact with our participants as well for Jennifer and Steve Canty. So you can share resources and other website link that you would like our participants to take a look at. Now, this is the most exciting part. Before we begin our discussions, I would like to introduce our first speaker today, Stephen Canty, and I would like to read his bio really briefly. So Stephen Canty is a marine biologist at Smithsonian Marine Station. He is also part of the Working Land and Seascapes Actions area of the Conservation Commons. His research focuses on the management critical marine ecosystem, coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrasses, and small-scale fisheries. Steve combines a range of research techniques to support management and decision-making of marine reserve design. And I interviewed Stephen in Earth Optimism TV episode 2 about a future full of fish. So if you haven't watched that episode, please go and check. Now, I would like to welcome Steve, and we'll give you the floor to introduce your work and maybe the project that you're currently working on. Please.
Thanks very much, Johannes. And thank you, At America, for inviting me here today to talk about my work and also to hopefully share some knowledge with you and also get some knowledge back. So as Johannes said, I'm Steve Canty. I'm at the Natural History Museum here in DC, and I work with communities really and governments as well, but mainly communities in how to help them manage their resources for the future. So if it's fisheries, how do we make sure they're sustainable fisheries? And not just thinking about the fish themselves, but thinking also about these really important ecosystems. And so if we can bring up the slides, I'd just like to show some of the key ecosystems that we work in. And some of these might be familiar to you. Most of my work is in the Caribbean, but in Indonesia, these 3 ecosystems are there. So coral reefs are one of them. Coral reef fisheries are super important to many communities around the world. And so making sure that the reefs are healthy and the fish are healthy means that we have healthy populations or healthy communities around. And then we also work in mangroves. So the next slide, please. And these, to be honest, this is my favorite ecosystem. This is where I feel most at home. Although it can be a little bit smelly, it's a lot of fun in there. And I find it to be one of the most enjoyable places to be. And I actually have some really big projects going on right now, looking at how mangroves can be used to pull carbon out of the atmosphere to help with climate change adaptation and mitigation. And this is based in Belize with a whole bunch of collaborators that we're working with there. And then lastly, this other ecosystem of seagrasses, another amazing ecosystem, often overlooked. And so we're trying to work now with these three ecosystems, find out what's going on with them, help with the management, but mainly find out what communities would like and use our science to help them move towards more responsible and more sustainable practices so that we can ensure that these ecosystems and the fisheries that they rely on and the ecosystem services they provide are there for the next generations.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve, for introducing all these very wonderful ecosystems. And I would like to point out that my favorite one is also mangrove, because in my hometown, my backyard is mangrove ecosystems. It's correct that it's a little bit smelly and muddy, but I like to go and explore and walking just to understand the ecosystems and learning about the species there. So thank you so much and welcome. And I'm excited to discuss more about your work in the field. Now, I would like to introduce our second speaker, Jennifer Collins. But before she gives her presentations, I would like to read her bio really quickly. So Jennifer is the Manager of Ocean Education and Outreach at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. She oversees the Science Liaison Program, which bridges the science and education communities at the museum, and is a member of the Smithsonian Conservation Commons team focused on Earth optimism. This is a very cool fact about her. In 4th grade, her visit to her visit to see the coelacanth at the California Academy of Science prompted a lifetime passion for scientific discovery. So coelacanth, I Googled this. In Indonesia, we call it ikan raja laut. I never seen that kind of fish before, so I would like to give the floor to Jen to give us a little bit more about her work and her story. Please, Jane.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for the invitation. Yes, the coelacanth is a huge, not the most pretty fish, but it's really old, and it really inspired me from a really young age to go into science, and science education is kind of the avenue I took. I am at the Natural History Museum. I started, though, as a classroom teacher. And so I've taught kids from, 11 years old to 18 years old, and have had the privilege of also working with a lot of scientists throughout my career. And if you have the slides there, I can point out a couple of kind of some milestones that really got me to where I'm at. So a lot of work that I did when I was a teacher in that bottom left-hand corner is I would come across really interesting science stories, and then I would try to translate them into classroom activities. So this bottom left picture is an example of one about some research on lizards that actually ended up being from a colleague that I now work with at the Smithsonian. I've also had the privilege of taking teachers out to sea, and in that top left corner is a picture of the JOIDES Resolution research vessel. And so we would go out to sea for days and learn about the science and the engineering and how to translate that into classroom activities. And a lot of the work that I do is really informed by that diagram you see on the right. It's called the science flow chart. And I'll put a link later in the chat to find it. But this is really a model of how science is done. And so one of my passions wherever I've gone is to really take science that's being done in the field and help teachers be able to teach it in a way that mirrors how scientists are doing their work. And so next slide, please. And so now I'm at the Natural History Museum and manage ocean education and also deep time education. So these are pictures from two of our exhibit halls where I get I have volunteers that work, and again, trying to take the scientist research that's done at the Smithsonian and other places and make it exciting and relevant to people of all ages. And we do this in a couple of different ways, and this is my last slide for the introduction. So we try to do live broadcasts. So we do programs where we broadcast out to researchers out at sea or in the field and get our visitors to ask them questions about what they're interested in. We also have a large number of volunteers who, the theme today is optimism, who we're really trying to teach how to have optimistic conversations with visitors to inspire action. One of our strengths at the museum is also we have a lot of collections, and so we have objects that we try to bring out to the visitors, and so they can explore and ask their own questions about the natural history science. And then we also do a lot of programs where the scientists come and talk with the public and have them explore the tools and the collections that they work with. So it's a lot of different that, and really this theme of optimism is super important and something I'm really excited to kind of dig into today. Thanks, Johannes.
Great presentations, Jen. So now, probably before we go dive into deep discussions and very deep questions, maybe I would like to kick off our conversation today with a very simple questions. I really like to ask this to our speakers. Since you're both ocean person or have worked in the seawater ecosystem, maybe I would like to begin by asking, what's your favorite ocean species in whatever ecosystem, in mangrove, intertidal, shore, deep sea too. I can begin. My favorite one, I already mentioned sea cucumber and then butterfly fish. And my other favorite species is parrotfish. And I like the fact that they're eating algae. 90% of their food is coming from algae from the coral reef. So I like to tell this fact to students and making them excited about this parrotfish. What about you, Steve and Jennifer?
Well, parrotfish for me are super important as well. But I would also say that another amazing fact about parrotfish is that what they poop out is actually the sand on the beaches that people lie on. So it's not just that they have this really important role as a herbivore, but they also help to create our beaches. So parrotfish are definitely up there as a favorite species. I would also say the leafy sea dragon. It's a cousin of the seahorse, and it's an amazing species. It looks somewhat prehistoric and exactly like a dragon, but it's got all of these leafy appendages coming off it because it hides in the seaweeds and the seagrasses. So that's my number one, just for being a weird and wonderful species.
That's great. What about you, Jen?
So I'm going to have to go with jellyfish. And it's kind of unfair because my husband is actually a jellyfish researcher. So jellyfish have allowed me to go around the world and get into interesting water, including Indonesia. I spent about 3 weeks in Indonesia a couple of years ago. And what's so exciting about them that they come in so many different shapes and sizes. I had no idea that they were so tiny, that the ocean is filled with so many tiny, tiny ones that you don't even see. And I just think they're amazing animals.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing. And maybe I would like to ask our participants today, maybe you guys can put in the chat box, what's your favorite species and what's the cool fact about that species that you would like to share with our speakers today? Please feel free. Now, to Jen and Steve, I would like to ask this question. What is the problem that you're trying, what problem are you setting out to address in your work, and why is it very important? Maybe I'm going to go to Jen first and then Steve.
Yeah, so one of the things we're trying to do is there's a lot of challenges that our ecosystems and our world faces. And so how can we connect our visitors to those challenges, but in a way where they understand the basic science, but also that motivates them to care and to act? And one of the programs we've been working on is this Teen Earth Optimism. And what this is, the goal of this event, it's an annual event, though we've created some other programs around it as well, is connecting teens to leaders in conservation, in science, in community organizations, and to their peers who are really making a difference in conservation. And so this event is a day where we start off with a teen panel, because we really feel like the teen voice needs to drive these conversations. And nowadays we have so many teens that are really motivated and really taking action. And so we start with a teen panel, and the audience can ask them questions, and we have a moderator. And these are centered around a theme. So we've done themes like climate change and food, and then kind of a more general conservation. And then after the teen panel, we have them explore, we invite these different leaders where they can explore and talk to the different people and learn about their careers, learn more about the science, learn more about the solutions. And we end the event with a zero waste food social. So we're trying to model sustainability actions by working with local restaurants to bring in food that's sustainable, that doesn't have packaging that can't be recycled. And this whole event is really designed to encourage the teens to talk. And along with that, we collect their voices. And so we have opportunities for them to share what they're thinking about, what their questions are. And in this, what you see here on this page we ask them to describe 3 words when they come into the event. And the words you see on the left-hand side, the top one, this was a climate one. The top one is the words that they said when they came into the event. And then as they were leaving, we asked them the same question: what 3 words, now that you've attended this event, do you think about when you think of climate change? And if you look at it, you can see that they were more optimistic when they left. And so this is what we're trying to do, is figure out how we can best do that. And then that last little slide is we're doing this with our experts too, and figuring out how can we make this event really engaging and useful for the experts, because the kids are teaching us so much. And so this is kind of the word cloud that our experts left with. So that's an event that runs every year. And we turned it to digital this year through a series that I can talk a little bit more later if people are interested.
Sure, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that very great program. And feel free to share the link where our participants can take a look at. What about you, Steve?
I've been giving this more and more thought of what we're the real end goal. And I think for us, a lot of this is actually food security, and how can we make sure and help communities have food security. As people know more and more, coastal communities are some of the most vulnerable in the world, as there's sea level rise, there's hurricanes, but also there's these fisheries that they depend on for food and for livelihoods, and they're under enormous threats and strains. And so we're addressing this problem, but one of our biggest issues with this challenge is that it's so interconnected that we can't just think of a fish and what's it doing once it's been caught or just before it's been caught. It's where is it spending its time? So as a juvenile, it might be in the mangroves or the seagrasses, and then as it grows up a little bit, it could turn up at a teen optimism event in the mangroves again or out in the seagrasses, but then it's out on the coral reefs as an adult. And so this is one of our biggest challenges of when we think of fisheries, we can't just think of the fish themselves. We've got to think, oh, where is it? Where do they spawn? So we need to have some thought around how do you make sure that fish are able to spawn and the larvae come out and then come back, and then where do they go? Okay, so they're in the mangroves and the seagrasses as juveniles, so we need to make sure that those areas are looked after and aren't being degraded. And then as they grow up, how do we make sure that the reefs are healthy so that they can support these fisheries? And then, so that's coming from my side of the very ecologist side of things, but we also have to think about how the humans are interacting with this, and how do we make sure that, we can't just stop fishing everywhere because people rely on these things. They need to make their money, they need to eat this, they need to be healthy and happy. So finding out more about those ecosystems, as in the people side, the social ecosystems, and bringing those together. And that's not an easy task, and it's sort of a great reason for the museums and other research institutes, is that there's so many specialists within these areas that we can draw on everybody's knowledge and expertise to start to put these different pieces of the puzzle together. And hopefully with that, what we can do is not just support biodiversity, but work with local communities and empower them and have them lead the management of their resources and use our science to inform how they want to move that forward and how they can adapt those decisions. So I think food security is our main issue, our main problem that we're setting out to address, but it's not just such a simple thing of look after the fisheries. There's all of these other facets that go with it. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Steve. While I'm still having you on the screens, and you mentioned a couple of things that I'm super interested in. You mentioned things such as like sustainable fishing, right? In your Earth Optimism video, episode number 2, if you haven't checked, please do. You're talking a lot about sustainable fishing, right? So it's between fish stock versus the welfare of the community, the food security. So I would like to give follow-up questions. What were the challenges when you were working with the community in the coastal area? What were their reactions when you first came and saying all this very scientific stuff and introduced the sustainable fishing to the community?
So thanks, Johannes. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to throw it back a little bit of, I've been super fortunate in my career of being able to live and work in some of these communities. So I've actually spent a year of my life in a small fishing community in Honduras of about 400 or 500 people. And so, spending every day with a fishing community and just talking with people, you get a real sense of the fishery and what's happening. And so we're lucky in the sense that we're not bringing in science and saying this is what you need to do. We're engaging with people and finding out what their problems are and seeing if we can help. Sometimes there are things that we can't help with, and so we put them in touch with other people. But for the fisheries piece, we're able to say, okay, what is your problem? And I think the biggest thing is with that, so some of the time the challenges are that there isn't information about these fisheries. Okay, so I don't know what people caught last week. I don't know what they caught 2 months ago. But by talking with people and just engaging them in conversations, you're chatting with fishermen that might have 3 to 4 to 5 generations of knowledge, and they can give you an idea of this. But you're not asking them, they're just telling you this in a nice conversation. And I think that's the biggest. So some of the challenge, yes, is getting this information, but it's the fun part of it is not going in there with questionnaires necessarily and sort of interrogating people and sort of making this a real interview, but it's talking with people, and like you would anybody, like if you go into your office and somebody's got a bit of a problem, you don't sort of have 10 questions laid out and say, so what happened, this, that, and the other, you sit with them and you're like, oh, so, tell me a little bit about this and tell me a little bit about that. And you get a much broader context of what the real problem is and how you can help. And so I'd say, as we move it forward with talking with communities, it's more about how we can put the science in to help inform decisions, and then the onus is on us. So the responsibility is back on us to show how the science has helped. And I think when we can do that, so that this two-way communication of you find out what the problem is, we see how we can help address that. We do what we need to do, or put in a regulation, or, talk with officials about changing something, changing a behavior, and then we sort of see how that evolves over time, report that back, and have the community as part of the system that evaluates that. We're able to say, look, this science did help. And then I would say that helps it being expanded to other communities, because other people are interested, as other communities talk with each other to say, oh, what's happened with your thing here? What happened with that? They would say, oh, well, this is the process we went through, rather than it being this horrendous top-down piece of imposing our science on people. And I think that that's the thing. We shouldn't be imposing our science. We should be working our science with these people, with communities, with other scientists in the region. I know that there's some great people in Bionesia, an NGO in Indonesia, that are doing some great work with communities. And it's very much that ethos that they have of working with people to address these challenges. So I'd say that would be my way forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, making sure that we collaborate with the community that we serve in our work, instead of like telling them what to do. So thank you for sharing. Now, I would like to go to Jen, since your presentation talking about the program that involves teen. You mentioned that you collect their voices and perspectives. I would like to highlight that you are actually creating a platform for teenagers to actually doing what they're passionate about in terms of conservation and sustainability. So I would like to ask a question: why is it so important to provide this platform and this space for a teenager to explore ideas?
I wasn't going to do that. That's a really good question, and the teens are our leaders of tomorrow, but increasingly so, they are the leaders of today. I mean, you see in the news, kids are joining. They are demanding change. They are demanding a good future, and so we have. At our museum, we have some resources that we want to connect them to help them and empower them to go out and do this. So part of the work we're doing with Teen Earth Optimism is to create that space for them to deepen their understanding about the conservation issues, deepen their understanding of the different ways that they can get involved. And that's really bringing in our community partners, so different organizations that are doing work to address solutions, and really letting the kids explore. And so the experts we bring in, we try to work with them so that they're doing a lot of listening of the teens, and then kind of gearing the conversation around their interests, because that's what this is all about, is really giving the teens a voice and really letting them know that we want to follow their lead and we will support them in the best way that we can. So, that's really why it's so important, I think. And I put in the chat, just really quickly, I put in the chat a link to some of the digital Teen Earth Optimism programs that if anybody wants to explore, that kind of models a little bit about what happens at these bigger events. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Jen, for putting those resources in our chat box. I would like to follow up on that answers what are ways and challenges to get these young people to stay involved and stay inspired in your work?
Yeah, I don't think we've figured that out yet. We have a summer program where we work with teens, and so part of our design of these events is having conversations with them and getting their advice on how to do this. And in one of the more recent ones, conversations we had, they were sharing when they're on social media a lot and they are bombarded with the negative messaging and just this doom and gloom. And so we're trying to take that into account and address that. So we can't just ignore the problems. We have to talk about the problems, but then find those points of connection. And our teens are different, our audiences are different. So we have to find different ways to connect. And so that involves a lot of listening and having a menu of different pathways to move forward with them. So it's not easy, and it is a long-term piece, but I think, the bottom line is we need to listen more and react more and let them do more of the driving. So create the space for them to drive.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really important. Because sometimes they just have idea and they just need someone to listen and interact with those ideas. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. Now I would like to go to Steve with this question. Since you mentioned that you work with the community in the coastal area in one of your projects, so in your work, how do communities and publics contribute to your work?
So the communities are the basis of our work. For us personally, we won't work in a community unless there's sort of been some kind of invitation to work with them, so that it's always as organic as possible of integrating our work to try to answer a problem or be part of the answer to a problem and address that solution. So we've been lucky in that respect of, we've been living and working in those areas previously. We're now, or parts of the group are up in DC and other places, still people down in Honduras or in that region. And so we still have these really good contacts with the communities. And I would say that that's another key piece of why it's important you need to have these local partners. You need to have collaborators that can have contact with the communities, can sort of make those introductions to you, so if they don't have the skills, because all of what we do needs to be a collaborative effort. I can't do all of it and I don't want to do all of it. How do we bring in all of these different people with all of these different skill sets to do each of these different pieces and make it a very shared piece, but listening to the community at that same time, because it's their resources. They're the people that have to live there continuously. They're the people that make their livelihoods from it. So I would say it's about listening to the communities, making sure that they're not just engaged, but they're actually actively contributing because it's their resources, and also make the onus on ourselves, again, that responsibility of sharing that information back, so that we're not just keeping it and making papers or, making special discoveries. And it's their resources, it's their piece. They need to know about it, because the other piece of this is, as I said previously, they have so much information. They live with it. They know little changes. There could be the seasons change. This year it's a little bit later, or something's happened with this, because normally it's purple and this year it's brown. There's things that we, parachuting in can't ever know these pieces like they do. So knowing that the community is part of it, and also local collaborators are there in it. It needs to be that, and that way, you're always welcome back to communities when they feel part of the project because it's theirs, and that you're working with local people. Because without local collaborators, you're not going to get anywhere. So I think the biggest piece is make sure that it's that collaborative effort of the community, local actors, know who's from the governments, whether that's local or national, that you need to be talking with, local researchers that are there already. There's no point me coming in and pretending that nothing's ever happened before, because there's some great researchers in every country doing things. How can we include them in pieces? How can we enhance what they're doing, or just let them do that and see how we can support them in any way? So I think that's the key piece of keeping that optimism alive, is by making sure that we're not making things redundant by doing things again, but by enhancing what's already there and seeing just how we can contribute. But it's also just making sure that communication is open, and then it's a dialogue in both ways, and that it's not just us telling people.
Yeah, great answer, Steve. And the silver lining of what Jen and Steve said before is listening. That's the most important piece of everything. Just listen and react and interact with those things that exist in the field. So I would like to go to Jen, since you're the expert of connecting science, bringing science to the classroom, and you translate a lot of scientific facts to the classroom activity. Now I'm curious, what were the steps that you did in your work to bring the science to a very creative classroom activity?
Yeah, so part of it is finding the right stories. Not all science stories are easily transferable into the classroom. And so what I've looked for is, an interesting question that's tangible, that's easy for kids to understand. Data sets that you can visualize. And so, for the lizard one, there was, numerical data, but we could change them into little cartoon lizards, and we could have kids create patterns out of those. So they use the data to look for patterns. So that's another piece, is data where the patterns are really clear. Activities where the kids can generate different hypotheses and use that data to test them, and that have kind of a really strong connection to the science standards that are supposed to be taught in the classroom. So that's really what it is, and it's not easy to do. I have definitely failed at translating some science into activities. But when you find the right story, it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. Now, to follow up on that answer, in Indonesia, we have a lot of traditional stories. We have a lot of culture focus or culture specific story where we learn about specific species in that package and inside this story. So maybe I would like to follow up on your answer. How do teachers in Indonesia or educators in Indonesia can utilize this story to introduce science in their classroom?
Yeah. So we at the museum, we have a big anthropology department, and stories and cultural perspectives are, central to that. And so I think it's creating that framework, or that understanding that, we have different ways of viewing the world, and all of those different ways are important when put together. And so kind of, what Steve was talking about, it's about the interest of the community. And so can we, and kind of placing those cultural stories in context with the science. Sometimes they don't combine, as closely, but giving also kind of equal platform, because both are so valuable. I also think that, those cultural stories and those familiar stories can be the entryway. So a lot of what we try to figure out is, especially for kids that are not really interested in science, how can we hook them? And so sometimes these stories can be the hook, and we can get them into the science that way. We do that through kind of the arts also. So literature and art, whether it's visual art or dance, things like that. We've been exploring those ways. So I think it's again about it can be an entry point.
Yeah, that's really important. Sometimes stories can convey a very strong message and can be a very good entry point for us to explain about something. I did my research in climate communications, and I discovered a lot of local stories that tie into culture, how people explain the water, how people explain the environment, the sun, and other elements in nature. So that's very important. Now, talking about culture, I would like to go to Steve. So when you work in the field with the community, what was your reaction when you learned about new species that you never seen before, that probably they only have this the name of the species in a local language? What was your reaction, and what did you do with that, Steve?
So yeah, so it's one of those things of learning from other people is always one of my favorite things, and it's also a great way to build those relationships. And I think that, as scientists, it's fantastic when you do learn things from the communities of things that you've never seen before, and you want to learn more and more about it. And by communities providing you with that knowledge, I think that's when you really see how you can learn from each other. So things like that really excite me, because that's when we see ourselves as equals, because we've both learned things from each other. Or sometimes, they've been teaching me a lot more about things that I could ever teach them. And so learning things about, some of it can be, the species, but you didn't know that it moved at certain times, or that it had this weird behavior, and they'd be like, there it is, it's jumping out of the water. And like, I never knew eagle rays would be always sort of, you'd see one or two eagle rays jumping out of the water at dusk. And then, but there's fishermen and other people telling you this, and you go out and you'd see it. And I can't explain why it happens or what they do it for, but just these sorts of experiences, it's beautiful to see those species and sort of be out in these beautiful areas, but just that interaction with people is always fun. So I always see those types of incidences or sharing of experiences one of my favorite things. And I always look forward to going to new places to find out more things about what's going on there, and learning a more deeper sort of understanding of the whole ecosystem, because I might just be focused on a fish species or, my beloved mangroves. And then they're teaching you so much more about not just the fish, but their culture. And I think understanding how culture interacts with how people view and use resources is really important to know how we can move forward with responsible and sustainable actions. So yeah, I love learning more, especially from the people who use them and are around those ecosystems all the time.
Yeah, that's a really, really good answer, Steve. Now, I'd like to go to Jen, since you've been working in education classroom for a very long time. So thinking about big thinking, or the impact of Earth optimism, sometimes the teachers playing a very significant role to influence the students and to inspire the students. So in some situations, some teachers they never expose themselves to certain ecosystems. For example, I live in an urban area. I never been to the mangroves, or I never went to intertidal. So do you have any advice or recommendation to our Indonesian educators on how to, what are the first step for us, maybe first to learn about this ecosystem and then to transfer this to our students?
So this may not quite answer your question, so I will continue. But one of the things is, just getting kids hooked by going outside their front door. There's so much to explore just, in the area that you're at. And one of the we have a couple of we have this project called BioCube, and I'll put a link in there. And it's taking this little frame that you can make out of anything and sticking it in a space that you're familiar with and looking closely at everything that lives there. And by doing so, then thinking about like, what questions do you have about the life that's in this little space? So there's a lot you can do without having to go to other places. I do think, there's more and more, this isn't practical for everybody, but there's more and more opportunities for teachers to get out to experience, different ecosystems, different habitats. It's one of the goals of that when I went out on the ship, right? It was to transport people from what they're familiar with into a totally different place so that they can better understand how science operates, and so that can then translate to the students. But so I encourage people to look for these opportunities because they're often paid for. You have to apply, but it is really transformative when you can get out into a different place. Now, practically speaking, for the students, I can also share, we do a series of videos, kind of interviews for students, for the classroom, that connect kids to a wide range of different people that work in these different habitats. And so there's, resources like that people can tap into and bring in. So you're not directly talking to the scientist, or you're not directly in that field with the person, but you can, kind of see and interact at a smaller scale. But it is a challenge. But I think, again, understanding your own and learning how to ask questions, learning how to observe just in the world around you, that makes it easier to kind of think about and explore places that you're not in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen, for your sharing, and Steve as well. So now for our participants, if you guys have questions, please put it in the chat box, and we will read those questions in our question and answer sessions. Now we're gonna go to a very relaxing activity where we are all going to be playing an online game, Kahoot, and our team will put in the chat box the Kahoot website link that you guys can go, and I will be sharing my screen in a second, so you guys can see the code, and we all can play from that platform. 1 second. Perfect. So what you need to do is go to kahoot.it, and I will be starting the game soon. Okay, so on your screen, there's going to be a form that will require you to enter the PIN of the game. And the PIN is 13031668. And I am going to give about like 30 to 40 seconds for everyone to join our Kahoot. We only have one player right now, Jellyfish. We have Rabbit. All right. Again, you can go to www.kahoot.it and then enter the PIN of the game. It's 130. It's on the screen. And I'm gonna give a a couple more seconds before we go to the quiz. And there's going to be a winner of this quiz. So I'm curious who's going to be the winner of this quiz. And Steve and Jen, you also can play if you want. All right, I'm going to give 5 more seconds before we go and play the game. Oh, you can pause. All right. I think we can go now since we have 11 players. I'm going to start the game. And I'll read the question for everyone. So, Earth Optimism number 4 Kahoot quiz. The first question, is it true or false that protecting marine biodiversity has important benefits to coastal community? I have 10 seconds. I'm so nervous about the music. Makes me so nervous. All right, great. Thank you so much. 12 out of 12 people agree that it's true that protecting marine biodiversity is very important for the coastal community. Now, okay, so this is the winner of the first round. We have 5 rounds. So let's see if Leopard can still the winner. Question number 2. To effectively conserve and manage marine resources, how much of the world's oceans should be under complete protection? 1%, 21%, 15%, and 30%. Honestly, I don't know about this, and I would like to ask this question to our speakers. It's 30%. Wow, I didn't know that. And yeah, this is something that I would like to ask the Jen and Steve after this game. Okay, we have Joni Cobra, the winner. Question number 3. What types of ecosystem services can marine habitats provide to coastal communities? Storm protection, water filtration, fisheries, or all of the above, and many more. All of the above, of course. It's a very tricky question. Hard to decide. Now, question 4 out of 5. Okay, we have Aquaman now, top of the game. Question number 4. How can you encourage conservation and action? Is it by increased access to resources, practice Earth optimism, communicate ideas, or all of the above? Again, this is a very tricky question. All of the above. Yeah, you guys seems like already understand the game. Okay, we still have Aquaman, and this is gonna be the revealing question. Who's the winner? What do coral reefs provide? Select all that apply. Habitat for the fish we eat, compounds for the medicines we take, coastal protections during severe weather, and barrier against pollution. Wow, it's answer A, B, and C. It's correct, but yeah, let's see. Who is the winner of you can pause just for Steve and Jen. Oh no, you can pause is not the winner. The winner is Aquaman. Okay, congratulations, Aquaman. Now I'm gonna stop the game and stop sharing. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for everyone who participated in Kahoot question. Now, Jen and Steve, I would like to give you a context about ikan paus. Ikan paus is an Indonesian language for whale. So that's that's just for your information. Now we're gonna go deep dive into answering some questions from our participants. So this question's coming from Salima, and this question's will go to Jennifer. I'm interested to know more about the designs of teaching or classroom activities made by the teachers participating in the field trip. It was just a reaction and of Salima. And another question is coming from Ayunda. Jennifer, I'm interested to know more about the Earth Optimism teen event. Looking forward to receiving the link on the event. Also, it's just in a reactions coming from our participants. Thank you so much for reacting to our presentation. And we're looking forward for your question, guys, in your chat box. Okay, maybe question to Steve and Jennifer. What kind of programs do you use nowadays since it's pandemic and it's virtual? How do you being creative about these about your programming during COVID-19? Maybe Jennifer first, and then Steve.
Yeah, so we have switched a lot of our programming over to digital. And so we do webinars. One of the things we've done is, we usually do in-person school group classes. And so we've changed those. So we do those all online. So that school groups still can sign in and have a teacher and go through it. But it's that. And then, we've done, in order to get visitor and student feedback, we've done a lot of more on social media and through digital surveys to get that kind of information. So going digital.
What about you, Steve? How does the pandemic influence your work?
So it's been, to be honest, very tricky, especially with some of our communities where they might not have internet. So with other researchers, Zoom and other platforms, I don't know whether they've been fantastic or a nightmare, because I seem to spend most of my life on this digital format, it's nice because you get to connect with people, but I prefer to connect with people in person. I think the hardest thing realistically has been, how do we connect with communities when we don't have access to them? And this once again goes back to why having local NGOs, local researchers, not being part of the team, but they are the team they might be leading and we're supporting, but being part of that larger community of people, depending on in-country restrictions. In some places, people have been able to get out to communities, of course, wearing masks and going under other types of COVID health and safety requirements. But maintaining that connection is key. That people don't feel abandoned during this time, and just also moving things forward. So I would say the biggest thing is being able to support in-country partners to make sure that they have the resources that they need to keep themselves moving. And then, I've been part of a lot of presentations and other the sort of pieces like this, like today, of how do we talk about these things, how do we move forward? And it'd actually be interesting to find out from many of the participants what they've done to engage with their children or like in their classrooms, and what inventive things have they done to sort of keep that connection moving during this strange time.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answers. And it's a time when we all need to be creative, and that's innovation comes, and that's where the big impact of Earth Optimism comes. Being optimistic during pandemic is something that we need to tell everyone. So since I'm still waiting for questions from participants, maybe I would like to address one of my questions. So to Steve, you've mentioned that you've been working with community members in the coastal area or other ecosystems or other areas that you work with. So I would like to understand more how's the dynamic of working with the community leaders, or, for example, government, those who are making policies, and how does your work influencing these community leaders?
So I think a lot of it is that they influence our research, is how I would put it, because it's their questions that we're trying to answer. And as researchers, we have sometimes this problem of we're interested in certain things and that's what we'd like to do. But does that answer the problem? Does that get to solve this problem that communities have? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And it's more us, how are we flexible so that our research can be applied? Or where it's not applied, how does it find that basis? You know, this is another thing of sort of sometimes the issue around collections in museums. People don't necessarily see their value and they just see, oh, look, you're showing off some things behind a glass screen. But actually those collections can be hundreds of years old and give us this amazing look into the past that we don't have. And we can use those to see how things have changed and how things might change into the future. So bringing all of that together is another key piece of how our research can help inform these pieces, because there is this sort of catalogue of all of these samples and specimens that we have in the museums that make museums really quite unique in how they can move forward in helping answer some of these questions that communities have. And once again, I think with communities, it's all about respect from both levels, understanding that you're equals, understanding that you're both learning things from each other, whether that's from the fisherman, the leader of the village or the community, the president of an association. Everybody there has got things to bring to the discussion and are part of the solution. So just being respectful of everybody, I think, is another key piece.
Thank you so much for very great answers. And I'd like to go to Jen, follow up on Steve's answers. How do you work? So in your experience, you work with teachers, right, at school. So from your experience, how does your work influence schools, or the other way around? For example, after students participating in your programs, what's the next step? What's the follow-up after that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're limited by at the museum is that follow-up step. So we don't often get to follow up with the teachers or the students to see the impact. We sometimes do that through survey, but it's not easy to do. When I was a teacher, though, then you have more sustained interactions. News, what's happening, and integrate that into whatever it was that I'm supposed to teach. And going back again, not to sound repetitive, but giving the kids the voice to kind of explore, share their perspectives, and try to guide the conversation where they want to go is kind of the approach. But I will add, as we're kind of exploring some new exhibits, and we're designing some new exhibits and trying to really work with the local community at the very beginning to bring in their voice and to have a more sustained connection so that we can kind of interact with them over time and with, students or adults or whoever they are, and kind of learn the impacts. So we're trying to do a bit of that, but it's challenging.
Yeah, that's correct. And we do have a question from participant right now. So Budi Setiawan asked, how do you feel after the new administration in the US seems to support environment initiative? Maybe coming from Steve and Jennifer, what's your initial reaction?
You want to go, Steve?
I don't like to be that political. I'm happy for anybody that supports and understands how biodiversity isn't just about saving animals and species. It's actually at the forefront of how communities interact with biodiversity, with ecosystems. It's their health, our health, it's all interconnected. So having government support that is fantastic, and how we can combine things where humans and nature grow together in a responsible and healthy way is always good. So it's a positive, and it's nice that we're moving forward in that direction.
Yeah, and I'll just add, one of the things that I'm optimistic about is, our Smithsonian and other federal agencies have been asked to put together climate action plans and sustainability action plans. And so there's a lot of effort right now to look internally as different institutions and lay some goals and be held accountable for some change. And so I'm optimistic about that, because I think, it could have a really good positive impact.
Yeah, talking about optimistic and positive impact related stories, I wonder what are the projects that you both are currently working on? Steve, I know you mentioned that you probably have worked in mangrove ecosystems. So I would like to give the floor to you for you guys to share a little bit about the project that you guys are currently working on that you're optimistic about and you're excited about to our participants. Maybe I'm gonna go to Steve first and then Jen.
So yeah, I'll never not talk about mangroves. So mangroves, I'm really optimistic. I'm part of a project right now with a big group. It's in Belize. So we're working with the government of Belize, particularly the Forestry Department, the Fisheries Department, and the Coastal Zone. We're also working with WWF, Pew Charitable Trusts, Sylvestrum Climate Associates, the University of Belize, which they're one of our main partners for a lot of the field work. And what we're doing is we're trying to find out how much carbon is in the mangroves and the seagrasses for the whole country, and then putting that forward for their nationally determined contributions, which is a big part of the Paris Agreement, and seeing how, by finding out how much carbon we have in those ecosystems, we can help to protect both of those ecosystems and potentially restore some, and looking at these ways of how do you get financing from the carbon markets to help with that protection. So I'm super optimistic, because this is both a government wanted piece, so we're helping with a government ask, but it's also that communities are engaged with their mangroves, their seagrasses. They're very interested in them. We've previously done work where people have knocked on the door of the Smithsonian in Belize and asked why certain mangroves are disappearing, and we were able to go and research that. So we know that the communities are engaged, and basically we just want to be able to get into the field at some point. But we know that through the university, we're going to be working with students and local researchers. The government and NGOs are all engaged, the communities are engaged. So I'm really optimistic that that work is going to actually help with the protection and the management of those ecosystems, and it's going to have some really big, important impacts to climate change mitigation, but also adaptation. By having those ecosystems in place, we're going to provide protection against hurricanes and storms to coastal communities. We're going to help with fisheries and other pieces. So I honestly, I'm super happy to be part of that project, and I'm really optimistic to see how that moves forward.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear. What about you, Jen?
So about a year ago, we got some funding from NOAA, the National Ocean Atmospheric Administration, to develop a climate change course for middle school and high school students. And so we're piloting it right now, and I'm optimistic because we decided to take an approach by using food as the hook. And so it's called Hot Potato. And it takes kids, connects them with something they're familiar with, in this case, this food, and connects them to different data sets about climate change in regions where potatoes are grown, and takes them on this journey that ultimately has them thinking about not only their individual impacts that they can have that can address climate change, but also, kind of more community and local based interactions. And so it's been really successful so far. And so I'm optimistic about that. I'm also optimistic about, just a lot of this research that our scientists are doing. And there's just a lot of stories that we're pulling out and hopefully using when we get back to the museum in the context of some specific programming and some specific exhibits. So there's just a lot to work with.
Yeah, this is a really, really great answer. I would like to follow up on both of your answers, since we've been sharing a lot of optimistic stories and facts in our discussions. And talking about being optimistic, sometimes we also encounter a lot of pessimistic in our work. Pessimisms from, like, for example, our environment, our friends saying that that's not a good idea. This is not the way we work. So maybe from your experience, both working in the field and in the classroom, working in the ecosystem as well, how do you navigate through this negative thoughts around us and like stay focused and being optimistic that maybe our educators would like to take those advice and bring with them in their practices? Maybe I'm gonna go with Jennifer first and then Steve.
Well, I think that starts with listening also, right? So listening to what the pessimism is, listening for and asking the questions that help find a common ground. So whether that's an interest or an experience that people share, and then trying to lead the conversation from that shared point of view. A lot of, there's a lot of research that really points to the fact that people listen to their friends and family and colleague a lot more than they listen to, brand names or even, big institutions, right? And so if you can influence the people around you and have just those simple conversations, and they go out and have simple conversations, it really spreads. So that's kind of the lens that we look at a lot, especially dealing with pessimism, is trying to have those little conversations that can be a springboard and spring out to others.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What about you, Steve?
It's a great question because it's all too easy to be pessimistic because there's a lot of things to be pessimistic about. But I agree with Jen. It's just about finding out what is driving that pessimism. Can we be part of a solution? Or if we can't be part of that solution, what is there to be optimistic about, and how can we focus on those good pieces and move that forward? And once again, it's all about building up and celebrating those achievements, even if they're really small and you might not notice them. But it's really important as you move towards a big goal, that you have these little targets on the way and you celebrate each one of those, because that builds that optimism and sort of erodes some of that pessimism along the way, because you're building a momentum. And I think what we don't do, and it's really hard to do sometimes, is celebrate those really small, great things that happen, but they seem insignificant at the time because you've got such a mountain ahead of you of what you want to achieve. But if you do celebrate those little things, that's really important, because there is so much negativity around that. Celebrating and embracing those small steps towards that big goal is really important, and that's what can build that momentum to create more optimism.
Yeah, that's so true. Celebrating small wins, it's very important. And then being around people who have the same thinking as you, like what Jen said, like talking to your friends or family that believe in your vision, believe in your ideas as well. So, Steve and Jen, since we are now approaching to the end of our sessions, maybe I'm gonna give this opportunity for you to give your closing statement. It could be like advice or recommendations to our educators in Indonesia, so they can go back with something meaningful that can be used in their practices. Please, Jennifer.
Yeah, so there are, you can look up a lot of different amazing work that's been done that is having an impact, whether that's at the individual scale, local communities, broader governmental impacts, but sharing those stories with kids and showing them that people are making a difference and that work is happening in so many different places, I think really is inspiring and can lead to that optimism and channel that into kids thinking about what it is, what is their role, what do they want to contribute to. That would be kind of, my recommendation for moving these conversations forward is really highlight what's happening that's positive.
Thank you. And Steve?
So I would say some of it is don't just think about what you do as small, because there's many scales that you're working on. So it could be your space around you when you're doing recycling, or it could be, you're restoring a whole area. So you've got this space going around, but also what you need to think of is that what you do today and tomorrow actually has this timescale effect in 20, 30 years, what's going on. And so by small actions today, you can link up with other people who are working in different areas. And so all of a sudden that's got bigger and it's geographically got bigger, but also your time frame of how you work today can influence how things happen tomorrow. So I think always that all of your actions have a bigger consequence than you might first think. And then I would say for the educators, I'm going to put another link in the chat, but I would say Bionesia, again, reach out to that NGO in Indonesia. There's a lot of great researchers doing some great things. And if you're interested in marine biology and finding out more about what's going on in your country and by researchers there, they would be a great resource to start with. I know there's others. I just have some contacts that have worked with this group. So I think that would be a great place to start so that you can find out more about the researchers and the research going on in Indonesia. And, these guys might be more than happy to do something with you as well.
Well, thank you so much, Steve and Jennifer, for coming to our session today and sharing a lot of meaningful stories and informations that hopefully will be very beneficial for our participants today. So thank you so much for coming to our session today. So as you guys probably already heard from Jen and Steve, they're saying that being around people who talk about good stories, about positive stories, is very important. So I would like to encourage you guys to sign up for our last episode of Earth Optimism Educators, so you can be to stay around these conversations next week. Now, before we close our session today, I would like to show another video of Smithsonian Institution's work. So please enjoy. Thank you. Thank you so much for the video. And for whatever reason, the music of this video always make me optimistic, and it transfers very good energy to me. So thank you so much again, Jen and Steve, for coming to our discussion today. And I'm going to hand it back over to Maya. See you next week.
All right, thank you so much, Mas Johannes, Mrs. Collins, and also Mr. Canty. That was a very insightful session. We hope to see you again next time. Now, the rest of you, please don't go anywhere, because I have the name of the winner for our social media quiz today. Earlier in this event, I asked you guys, in rural areas, this type of gas can be generated and used for cooking and lighting. And the correct answer is A, biogas. And our lucky winner for today is Hoirul Islamia from Facebook. Congratulations, Hoirul. As I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this event, Adamerica is having a very special activities, and we're giving out 5 folding bikes. And how do you participate? You can participate by posting a picture of you doing your favorite eco-friendly activities at the hashtag #PayEarthForward on the caption, and post it on your Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, and simply tag our social media account at ATAmerica. For further information, you can visit bit.ly/PayEarthForward. Well, now you may be wondering, how can I develop an awesome idea for a place like this? Easy. You can go to our website at www.atamerica.or.id, click create an event, and collaborate with us. All proposals coming to us will be reviewed, and your event might be featured here soon. And while on our website, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletters for weekly event updates sent straight to your inbox. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at ATAmerica for event updates, fun content, and so much more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Alright everybody, I think that wraps up this episode. It has been really fun, but unfortunately we have to say goodbye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy weekend!